The air inside the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill is thick with the scent of expensive incense and the metallic tang of old fear. It is October of 97 AD, and you are 67 years old, a man whose body is failing even as the world demands you stand firm. Outside the heavy bronze doors, the rhythmic thud of hobnailed boots on marble echoes through the corridors. This is not the sound of your honor guard arriving for a routine shift. It is the sound of the Praetorian Guard, led by Casperius Aelianus, coming to reclaim the dignity they feel you have stolen from them. You sit upon the throne of the Caesars, the master of the known world, yet you have never felt more like a prisoner. Even the highest office in the world offers no protection if you do not command the men with the swords. The men outside are not shouting for your blood, not yet. They are shouting for justice, or what they define as justice. They demand the heads of the men who assassinated your predecessor, Domitian. These are the same men who placed the laurel wreath upon your head just 1 year ago. To give them up is to admit your own powerlessness. To refuse is to invite a sharp end to your short reign. You hear the clatter of shields and the harsh bark of centurions' orders. You are a man of letters, a man of law and diplomacy, caught in a world that only respects the cold edge of a blade. The precarious survival of a civil statesman in a military empire is your reality, and today, that survival hangs by a single frayed thread. To understand how you arrived at this moment of desperate siege, you must look back 3 decades to the year 65 AD. You are Marcus Cocceius Nerva, a man of 35, navigating the treacherous waters of Nero's court. This is a Rome where a wrong word at a dinner party can result in a forced exit from life. You have already built a reputation as a sophisticated aristocrat, a man who knows how to listen while others speak too much. When the Pisonian Conspiracy is uncovered, a massive plot to overthrow Nero and replace him with a more traditional senator, you find yourself in the inner circle of the investigation. You are not a soldier, and you are certainly not a revolutionary. You are a pragmatist who understands that in a court ruled by a paranoid performer, information is the only currency that matters. Your role in helping Nero dismantle the conspiracy earns you more than just safety. You receive triumphal honors, a distinction usually reserved for generals who have conquered foreign lands, and a bronze statue is erected in your likeness within the forum. You are even invited to dine with the emperor himself, a privilege that carries as much danger as it does prestige. You watch as your peers are purged, their names erased from the public record, and their estates seized. You survive not through open defiance, but through the precision of your silence and the utility of your service. Survival in Nero's court is less about virtue and more about the careful management of your own visibility. The year 68 AD brings the fall of Nero and a chaotic cycle of civil wars, but you remain a constant fixture in the shifting landscape of Roman power. When Vespasian emerges from the dust of the year of the 4 emperors to establish the Flavian dynasty, you are there to greet him. You are the safe choice, a man of high standing who poses no threat to a new military ruler. In 71 AD, you serve as consul alongside Vespasian, signaling to the old aristocracy that the new regime values stability and traditional administrative skill. You move through the halls of power with a weary grace, witnessing the rise of the Colosseum and the expansion of the borders, always keeping your head below the parapet. By the time Vespasian's younger son Domitian takes the throne, the atmosphere in Rome shifts back toward the dark paranoia you remember from your youth. Domitian demands to be addressed as Lord and God, and his relationship with the Senate quickly disintegrates into a series of treason trials and executions. Yet even under this autocratic pressure, you thrive. In 90 AD, you are chosen as consul for a second time, sharing the office with Domitian himself. It is a dark irony that Nerva's greatest qualification for the imperial life is his perceived harmlessness. You are the man who is always there, always useful, but never ambitious enough to be a target. You learn to become indispensable to a man you likely despise, watching as he executes your friends and colleagues, while you remain the perfect, silent servant of the state. The silence of your life is shattered on September 18th, 96 AD. Domitian is assassinated in a palace conspiracy involving his own staff and perhaps even his wife. The city holds its breath, waiting for the legions to march or the guard to riot. Instead, the Senate acts with a speed born of pure desperation. They need a successor who will not be a tyrant, someone who can bridge the gap between the old world of the Republic and the reality of the Principate. You are 65 years old, childless, and physically frail. To the Senate, you are the perfect candidate, a placeholder who will restore their dignity and then quietly fade away. You are proclaimed emperor within hours of Domitian's final breath. Your first acts are a deliberate rejection of the previous regime's cruelty. You swear a public oath that you will never execute a senator, a promise that sounds like music to the ears of an aristocracy that has lived in fear for 15 years. You recall political exiles, restore confiscated property, and put an end to the hated trials for treason. You even sell off imperial assets, silver statues of Domitian, grand furniture, and vast estates to fill the depleted state treasury and fund your new programs. You promote a vision of public freedom on your coinage, signaling a return to the era when the emperor was the first citizen, not a divine master. However, the fragility of senatorial idealism is soon exposed. You have the title of emperor, but you have inherited a state that is deeply divided, and a military that still mourns the man you replaced. The Roman legions and the Praetorian Guard did not hate Domitian. To them, he was the commander who had raised their pay and led them in person on the Rhine and the Danube. They view your elevation as a coup by the pampered elite in Rome, and they have little respect for a 65-year-old lawyer who has never seen a battlefield. Your attempts to win them over with a massive cash gift are seen as a sign of weakness rather than generosity. In the provinces, the great generals watch you with a mixture of pity and predatory interest. You find yourself trying to govern a military empire through letters and decrees, while the men who actually hold the power are sharpening their swords and waiting for you to stumble. You attempt to fix the empire's deeper problems by launching the foundation of the Alimenta program, a system designed to help the poor children of Italy while supporting the agricultural economy. You appoint a commission of senators to handle the state's massive debts and distribute land to the landless poor. These are the actions of a statesman, but they do nothing to address the fundamental problem of your reign. You are a ruler without a mandate from the soldiers. The paradox of your freedom is that it is granted only by the military's permission, and that permission is rapidly being withdrawn. The ghost of Domitian's popularity haunts every meeting of your council, a silent reminder that your authority is built on sand. The tension finally breaks in October 97 AD, bringing us back to that claustrophobic scene in the palace. The Praetorian Guard, having simmered with resentment for a year, finally mutinies. They surround the Palatine Hill, not to kill you, but to humiliate you. Casparius Aelianus, their commander, demands that you hand over Petronius Secundus and Parthenius, the men responsible for Domitian's death. These are the men who put you on the throne. To surrender them is an act of betrayal that will leave your reputation in tatters. You stand before the soldiers and offer your own neck, telling them to take your life instead of your friends. It is a moment of genuine courage, but the soldiers only laugh. They do not want your life. They want your submission. They ignore your pleas and seize the conspirators, executing them right in front of the palace gates. You are forced to stand before the gathered troops and publicly thank them for their restorative justice. It is the lowest point of your life, a total collapse of imperial dignity that proves the ideals of the Senate mean nothing when the palace gates are being battered down. You are an emperor who has been held hostage in his own home, a ruler who can no longer protect his own supporters. The dream of a civil restoration lies broken on the marble floor. and you realize that if you do not act quickly, the empire will descend once more into the fires of civil war. In the days following the mutiny, you remain secluded, contemplating your failure. You are old, your health is declining, and you have no heirs to carry on your name or your policies. You realize that you cannot win this game with the hand you have been dealt, so you decide to change the game entirely. You look past the narrow interests of the Roman aristocracy and toward the frontiers. You need a man who has the respect of the legions, a man whose military record is beyond reproach, and whose loyalty can be tied to your own survival. You look to Marcus Ulpius Traianus, Trajan, the governor of Upper Germany and the most popular general in the empire. On a crisp day in late October, you make your way to the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the most sacred spot in Rome. The crowd is dense, a mix of curious citizens and wary soldiers. You ascend the steps, and in a move that catches both the Senate and the Guard off guard, you announce that you are adopting Trajan as your son and co-ruler. You grant him the title of Caesar and the powers of a tribune. This is not a dynastic move based on blood, but a meritocratic one based on the needs of the state. By choosing the empire's strongest general as your successor, you effectively purchase a bodyguard for your regime. The birth of the good emperors is not an act of idealistic reform, but a desperate move for political self-preservation that happens to be a stroke of genius. The effect of the adoption is immediate. The mutinous energy in the Praetorian Guard vanishes, replaced by the realization that any move against you is now a move against Trajan and his loyal legions on the Rhine. You have bridged the gap between the Senate and the army, using your final reserves of political capital to ensure a peaceful transition of power. Meritocracy, in this case, is a product of fear. The fear of a vacuum that would consume everything you have worked to build. Trajan remains on the frontier, preparing for his eventual arrival in Rome, while you remain the titular head of state, your authority finally secured by the shadow of his sword. You spend your final months in the gardens of Sallust, a sprawling imperial estate where the air is cooler and the pace of life is slower. Your health continues to fail, but the atmosphere is one of hard-won peace. You have survived Nero, the Flavians, and your own mutinous guards. You have lived to see your vision of a more balanced government take root, even if it required a general to water the soil. You are 67 years old, and though your reign has been short, barely 15 months, you have fundamentally altered the mechanism of imperial succession. By choosing to yield power, you have ensured that your name will be remembered among the architects of Rome's greatest age. In January 98 AD, a sudden fever and a stroke bring your life to a close. You die peacefully in your bed, far from the clatter of shields and the demands of angry soldiers. The Senate, which once viewed you as a mere placeholder, now mourns you as a savior. They vote to deify you, and you are carried to the mausoleum of Augustus to be laid to rest among the founders of the empire. You are the last emperor to be buried in that great circular tomb, closing an era of Roman history that stretched back to the very first Caesar. Your reign was a bridge, a necessary transition from the old ways of dynastic terror to a new era of stability. Your legacy is not found in grand monuments or conquered territories, but in the long peace of the century that follows. The 5 good emperors begin with you, and your decision to adopt Trajan sets a precedent for choosing the most capable man rather than the closest relative. You were a man of diplomacy in an age of steel, a survivor who knew when to speak and when to yield. As your ashes are placed in the cold marble of the mausoleum, the empire you saved continues to thrive under the man you chose. By recognizing your own limitations, you achieved a lasting victory that few conquerors ever could.